Day 3. The operator climbed down from the cabin. No rush. He knew the truth before his feet even hit the dirt. He pulled out his phone. Made one call. The machine is done. The ground is too wet, too much rock, the bucket teeth are sheared off. We can't go any further. The project manager, named Marcus Webb, 38 years old, with a civil engineering degree from a state university in Ohio, stepped out of his truck. He walked the length of the site. He said nothing. $400,000 worth of equipment, sitting idle. It wasn't broken. It hadn't stalled. It just couldn't move anymore. Deadline 4 days away. Gas pipeline. Contract with the state utility company. Liquidation damages, $15,000 for every day of delay. Marcus looked toward the fence. There was a man standing there, leaning against a wooden post, hands in his pockets, not looking at the machine, looking at the dirt. Marcus walked over. "Do you have anything that can run on this ground?" The man didn't answer immediately. He looked at where the machine sat, looked at the torn earth, looked at the bucket. Then he looked back at the area that needed trenching. "How deep do you need to go?" 8 feet. The man nodded, slowly. "Give me 1 hour." 1 hour later, from behind the warehouse came a sound. Not the smooth, insulated hum of a modern diesel. It was the sigh of old metal, the rhythmic, heavy grinding of iron tracks biting into the earth. A Caterpillar D4, 1959 model, straight open exhaust. No cabin, no air conditioning, no screens, no global positioning system. The paint had peeled long ago. Rust ran along the hood like the deep cracks on a farmer's hand. The operator, the one who had just declared the job impossible, laughed out loud. It wasn't a mocking laugh. It was genuine. Marcus Webb didn't laugh. He looked down. He looked at the tracks. Wide, low, hugging the ground. The man climbed onto the machine. He said nothing else. There is something about Midwest soil that isn't found in any geological report. It remembers. Spring rain doesn't just sit on the surface. It goes down. It seeps through layers of clay and shale, accumulating into invisible pockets of water hidden right beneath the grass. From above, the ground looks dry. Looks normal. Looks perfectly workable. But put a heavy enough object on it, apply enough pressure, and the ground will tell you the truth. The excavator Hartwell and Associates brought in was a Komatsu PC 390 2019 model. Operating weight 40 tons. Ground pressure 0.6 kilograms per square centimeter. On hard ground, that's a perfectly normal figure for a well-designed machine. On this patch of field in Blackwater County, Illinois, in April after a wet winter, it was a one-way ticket to hell. Day 1, the machine made 60 feet. Slow but steady. Day 2, 40 feet. Then it got stuck for the first time. Took 2 hours to pull it out. Nothing broke, but something had changed in how the soil reacted. Every time the bucket dug in, the surrounding earth shifted slightly. The foundation the machine stood on was slowly turning into soup. Day 3, 15 feet. Then it stopped. Not stuck. This time the teeth ground down completely against the shale, and the tracks began to spin on the mud the machine had created by crushing the very thing it was trying to stand on. This was the trap, and no one did anything wrong. No negligence, no bad decisions, nothing to blame. It was simply a case of equipment designed for one type of soil meeting another, and the gap between the specifications on paper and the reality underfoot was where the project began to collapse. Marcus Webb sat in the office trailer. In front of him was the spreadsheet. Remaining pipeline, 340 feet. Remaining time, 96 hours. Nearest replacement equipment, 90 miles away, none available. Contract penalties, starting at midnight on the 4th day. He looked out the window. The man was still at the fence, still looking at the dirt. Marcus stepped out. The operator's name was Dustin, 28 years old. 5 years of certifications, 11 different types of machinery. He was good, and he knew he was good. When the D4 rolled out from behind the warehouse, the sound of the tracks hitting the ground created a rhythm of something that had survived more than anyone in that yard could imagine. Dustin laughed. He didn't hide it. It was the laugh of someone witnessing something genuinely absurd. "Are you serious?" He looked at Marcus. "That's a museum piece. People take pictures of those at county fairs. They don't put them on a job site." The man, Floyd Carver, 76 years old, climbed onto the machine. He didn't look at Dustin. He checked the left steering clutch, put his hand on the gear lever. He listened to the engine for a moment, just listening, doing nothing. Like a man placing a hand on an old friend's shoulder after years apart, checking to see if they're all right before speaking. "I appreciate you wanting to help," Dustin continued, his tone less mocking, trying to sound reasonable. "Really, but that size isn't going to dig 8 feet in this soil. I just tried with twice the weight and failed." Floyd adjusted his seat. Faded blue flannel shirt, John Deere cap. His hand rested on the throttle with the ease of a man who had been touching it since before Dustin was born. "You dig with weight," Floyd said. He didn't look down. He didn't look at Dustin. He looked straight at the patch of land ahead. "I dig with contact." Dustin shook his head slightly, still unconvinced. "Contact doesn't change horsepower," he said, "or hydraulic force. You still need breakout strength to cut through shale." Floyd didn't answer immediately. He eased the D4 forward another few feet, listening to the tracks settle into the mud before speaking. "Only if you fight the ground." Dustin frowned. The ground already won against a 40-ton excavator. Floyd nodded once. "Because it was trying to overpower the soil instead of working with it." Dustin crossed his arms. "That's not how excavation works." Floyd finally looked at him. "No," he said quietly. "That's not how they teach it anymore." Dustin opened his mouth, then closed it. Marcus Webb looked down at the D4's tracks. He had studied ground pressure in school, learned it from books, lectures, and exams. But learning it in a lecture hall is different from standing here, looking at this and seeing it with your own eyes. The Komatsu PC-390 had 600mm tracks. This 1959 D4, 840mm, not just a bit wider, 40% wider. It was significantly lighter than the Komatsu, distributed over a much larger contact area. Ground pressure, approximately 0.28 kilograms per square centimeter, not even half of the machine currently sitting idle. It wasn't magic. It was physics. It was a design from an era before America had paved roads, when engineers knew their machines would have to work on raw, natural earth, swamps, hills, bogs, dirt just like this, and they designed accordingly. Later, as technology advanced, as machines became more powerful and faster, and as there were paved roads for transport and concrete pads to stand on, tracks narrowed because they didn't need to be wide anymore. A logical trade-off, provided you knew what kind of soil you were about to face. Marcus knew this soil now. Later than he should have, but he knew. Floyd shifted into gear. The laugh on Dustin's lips didn't vanish instantly. It faded slowly like evening light when clouds move in. There was no single clear moment. It was just there, and then it wasn't. The D4 moved onto the site. If this story is worth telling, hit like so the channel knows. And if you know someone who needs to hear this, someone being underestimated for lack of a new degree, or someone disregarding the old because it isn't shiny, share it with them. Let's continue. Floyd started working at 6 in the morning. No one asked him to start at 6. That was simply the time he had started everything since 1971. Marcus arrived at 7, coffee in hand, standing at the fence watching. The first thing he noticed, Floyd didn't dig in a straight line. The D4 circled, not randomly. It followed a pattern, one that took Marcus a while to realize was Floyd moving along the areas where the grass grew thicker, meaning the ground was firmer underneath, creating an access route for each section of the trench. No GPS, no surveyors, just a human eye and decades of looking at this dirt. The D4's bucket wasn't large. For modern machines, this was a clear disadvantage. Less per scoop meant more cycles to reach depth. But Floyd didn't force the machine. He took just enough each time. He let the machine find its footing before digging again. He never let the bucket get stuck long enough to create suction. Every movement was small, deliberate, and necessary. Dustin came out at 9. He didn't mean to watch, or at least he pretended not to. But he stood there, hands in his pockets, eyes on the machine. Dustin came out at 9. He didn't mean to watch, or at least he pretended not to. But he stood there, hands in his pockets, eyes on the machine. At first, he watched with the detached expression of someone waiting for the inevitable failure. Every operator knows the feeling, watching a machine work outside its limits and waiting for the moment physics finally says no. But the moment never came. The D4 never forced itself forward. It shifted, adjusted, paused. Every few feet, Floyd altered the bucket angle slightly before digging again. Dustin narrowed his eyes. "He's compensating for subsurface movement," he muttered. Marcus looked over. "What?" Dustin didn't answer immediately. His eyes stayed fixed on the tracks. "The ground underneath is shifting differently every few feet. He's reading it before the machine settles." Marcus looked back at the trench. 30 feet, then 40. Still no spinning tracks, no sinking. Dustin crossed his arms tighter. That machine should be bogging down by now. But it wasn't. Marcus didn't answer. He kept watching the trench line stretch farther across the field. End of day 1, 90 feet. Less than the Komatsu on day 1. More than the Komatsu on days 2 and 3 combined. Floyd said nothing about the numbers. He shut down the machine, climbed down, and took a wire brush to scrape mud from the track links. No rush. Marcus approached. "Can you start earlier tomorrow? Maybe 5:30? Floyd looked at him for a moment. "The sun isn't up enough to read the ground at 5:30. He said nothing more, went back to wiping down his machine. Marcus understood. He didn't ask again. Day 2, Floyd hit rock. Not just scattered stones. A wide slab of shale slanted across the trench line from 4 to 6 feet deep. This was exactly where the Komatsu had shattered its teeth. This was why Dustin had stopped on day 3. Floyd shut off the engine. "Got down!" Took a probing rod, a simple iron stake, pointed at the end, about 5 feet long, the kind of tool that doesn't exist in any modern equipment catalog, and walked the line of the rock. He tapped it into the ground at regular intervals, listening to the impact, feeling the vibration travel up his arm. 15 minutes. Then he went back to the machine. He didn't tell anyone what he'd found. He simply changed his angle of approach, entering the rock slab from its narrowest point, following the grain of the stone, not hitting it broadside, like splitting wood with the grain instead of across it. Dustin, who was now sitting on the hood of his truck, no longer pretending not to watch, gave a slight nod. A small, slow nod of a man who had just realized something important. The rock section took 4 hours, but it was cleared. No broken teeth. No stuck machine. End of day 2, 220 feet total. 120 feet to go. 36 hours left. Day 3 was the day of the wettest ground. The final stretch of the trench ran through the lowest part of the field, where the groundwater was closest to the surface, where after a light overnight rain, the grass was still soaked to the root the next morning. This was the section where even Floyd had to stop and think. He did something Marcus had never seen on a job site. He walked out into the middle of the field, 200 feet away from the work area, standing alone, looking at the ground, watching how the water from last night's rain settled, which spots dried first, which stayed wet, which looked dry but weren't. He read the earth. 10 minutes. Nothing in his hands. No measuring tools. No phone. Just him and the land. They had known each other for many seasons. Then he came back. He didn't dig the pipeline trench. He dug a temporary drainage ditch first, only 2 feet deep, parallel to the main line 15 feet away. 1 hour lost to this. But the water drained along the temporary trench, and the center area dried out enough for the D4 to stand firm without churning up mud. This technique isn't in any operator training manual. It isn't in Caterpillar's technical literature. It isn't in any engineering textbook. It was in Floyd Carver's head because he had learned it right here on this land in 1978, when he had to drain the West Field, made exactly the wrong decision, and spent 1 week fixing it. His mistake from 1978 was saving Hartwell and Associates' project today. Floyd shut down the machine at 4:47 in the afternoon. The deadline was the next day. He didn't look at Marcus. He didn't wait for a reaction. He climbed down, checked the tracks, and wiped the machine. 340 feet, 8 feet deep, on line. On grade. Done. Marcus stood looking at the entire trench for a long time. Then he said, "Do you need me to sign anything?" "Send the check to the address on the mailbox by the gate." Floyd got back on the machine, drove it toward the warehouse. He didn't look back. 3 weeks later, Marcus Webb called Floyd. Not just to say thanks again. He wanted to ask about another job. Mason County, same soil, same tight deadline. "Your big machines couldn't handle that one?" Floyd asked. "We haven't tried yet, but the geo report is almost identical." A short silence. Fine, I need to see the terrain before I give you a price. Marcus drove out. Floyd walked the site. It took 20 minutes, just walking, looking at the dirt, saying nothing. Then he came back and gave a number. Marcus didn't haggle. That was time number 2. Time number 3 was September of that same year. Another pipeline company, not Hartwell, heard Floyd's name from a field engineer who had stood at that fence back in April and told the story to a colleague over lunch. Rumors move like that in this industry, not through websites or ads, through stories told at lunch. Time number 4 was the following winter. The ground was freezing unevenly. The top layer was hard, but underneath it was still moist, creating stress fractures when heavy machines sat on it. Floyd handled it by working with the temperature, waiting until midday when the surface breathed a little before starting. No one on that company's engineering team had thought of it. Floyd didn't explain. He just did it. If you wanted to understand, you stood there and watched. Times 5 and 6 happened close together, the spring of the second year. 2 projects, 2 different county roads, the same type of problem. By then, Floyd Carver's name had begun to circulate in a small circle of infrastructure project managers in central Illinois, not famous in the usual sense, just that when everything else failed, someone in the room would say, "Call the old man in Calhoun." Floyd didn't lower his price for any of those 6 times. It wasn't because he was greedy. It was because he knew the value of what he provided wasn't in the hours worked. It was in the fact that his D4 went places nothing else could, and he knew how to get it there. It was the kind of value that doesn't have a service code. There is no line in a standard contract to describe it. No contractor's price list features it. It was simply, either it can't be done or you call Floyd. 2 years, 6 times. Over 2,000 feet of trenching in soil that modern equipment refused. Not once was he late for a deadline. Floyd Carver still lives on that land in Blackwater County. The D4 is still in the warehouse. People have asked to buy it more than once. Floyd shakes his head. He doesn't explain. He doesn't have a website. No phone number on the internet. When people need to find him, they ask someone who knows him, who asks someone who knows him. Eventually, someone says, "The mailbox at the gate, County Road 9, north of Bell Creek." He answers letters within 1 week. He doesn't take every project. There are times he goes out to see the terrain and says, "Your machine can do this. Call Dustin," because he knows when he is the right answer and when he isn't. That, too, is a form of wisdom. Dustin, the operator who had laughed on that third morning, moved into equipment management for a smaller firm in Springfield a few years later. In a job interview, they asked him about his equipment management skills. He told this story. "I learned more in 3 days watching Mr. Floyd work than I did in the 2 years before that," he said. "Not because I wasn't working before, but because there are things you can only see when you're forced to stand still and watch." He doesn't laugh at old machines anymore. Not because of philosophy, but because he remembers that April morning clearly and how that laugh felt when it died, and he doesn't want to feel that way again. Marcus Webb, last asked about that project, said one short sentence. "I brought something home from that job site that wasn't in 4 years of engineering school. Not because the school wasn't good, but because some things can only be learned by standing at a fence and watching until you understand. The lesson isn't don't buy new machines. The lesson isn't old people are always right. Such easy conclusions miss what was really happening here. What really happened was this. Floyd Carver knew what fit which problem. He knew it not because he read a lot, not because he had a degree, and not because he was smarter than everyone else. He knew it because he had stood on this earth long enough for the earth to start talking to him. Long enough to make mistakes, understand them, and not repeat them. Long enough that the machine in the warehouse was no longer a machine. It was an extension of his hands, his eyes, and the way he understood the dirt. We live in an age of speed, fast learning, fast certifications, fast promotions. Throw away the old, get the new. This is the right way for many things, but not for everything. There are problems where the right answer is something no one looks at anymore. It's the person whose name isn't on the organizational chart. It's the machine sitting silent in the backyard shed. The problem is, you don't know that until everything else has failed. And by then, you hope there's still someone standing at the fence. The 1959 D4 is still running. Not because it doesn't break, it's broken many times. Each time, Floyd fixes it. Sometimes it takes 1 week, sometimes 1 day. He fixes it because he knows it. Every part, every sound, every way it changes when something isn't right. That is the kind of relationship that comes in only one way, through time, through attention, and by staying long enough. It can't be rushed. It can't be condensed into a course. It comes the old-fashioned way. If the story of Floyd and the D4 left you with something, a thought, a memory of someone you know like him, leave it in the comments. I read them all, and if you want to keep hearing stories like this, hit subscribe. Nothing else. Just real stories told slowly about real people doing real work.